Well, hello everybody, welcome back to Four Lights Wellness. My name is Omid. In this video, I want to share just a little bit of how I've been thinking about anxiety, depression, trauma, and how all of that can lead to addictions and how you can actually get over it. What I call the peaks and valleys of life. Let's start with the normal stuff that kind of happens. There's a little bit of bad, there's a little bit of good, but for the most part through life, even though some longer periods of bad or really heightened experiences of good and that kind of stuff can happen, we're hoping by the end of life that there's more good than bad. And it can help to do things like journaling and gratitude practices and celebrating as much as you possibly can to experience more of the good than the bad instead of focusing on the bad. But the challenge is sometimes in life, things can happen that are so severely bad that they can outweigh the good. And that's the second line right here. Let's say, for example, there's a birth trauma that happens or some horrendous example of childhood abuse or something like that. Something really, really, really big and scary happens. And especially if it happens in that first 7 years of life where the brain's kind of in this state of magical thinking, but it also doesn't know the world and it's mapping the world. Now, the worst thing that can happen is the worst thing that happened. What ends up happening with the brain in that state is it starts to say, hey, I don't care if it's a little tiny bad thing that happened when I'm like 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever. It's going to basically feel like the worst thing that ever happened because the brain likes proof, not promises of good stuff. Or the other way things that happen is, let's say, for example, you're in poverty and there's something that's bad that's happening for a really, 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 really long time. It doesn't matter all of the good things that are happening. Your nervous system itself starts to focus in on all of the bad stuff that happened. What I tend to think about with this is that the really, really big peak negative emotion, that tends to lead a little bit more towards anxiety, that little A over there. And then this low and long, there's a lot of proof that life is not that great for us. That can lead to a little bit more of a depressive state. But either way, the brain starts making things up. It starts to try and equate all of the little good things that happened into the bad. And it's why, especially for me, when I was growing up, there's some stuff that happened, but it was like I would tell people about it, and then they would say, but Omid, you're super happy, you're gregarious, there's all these good things that you tell us all about. Why are you still so stuck on the past? My nervous system was kind of telling me, hey, I still haven't healed from this stuff, or I still haven't healed from this stuff, and it still feels like that stuff can happen. So here's where this becomes useful, right? If we want more on the good side than the bad, there's obviously two ways we can fix this, right? We can go more on the good side, and that's a trap. That's where the addiction starts to come in. If I, for example, have a really, really big negative, let's just make numbers up. This was like negative 1,000. And all of the normal experiences that can be good in life, hanging out with friends, sharing a good solid meal with somebody that needs it, trying to give to charity, all of these things might only ever come up to like plus 100 or 200. So then I'll start to reach for things to magnify it. I'll even give more money to charity, or I'll get into alcoholism, or I'll start to get into drugs, or I'll get into anything that's trying to get me high, higher than the pain. The problem is with any of those types of addictive substances is they come with repercussions and drawbacks and end up actually adding negative to the scale, right? Think about it. If I drink way too much, I'm going to have a hangover the next day. If I drink too much, I'm not going to be as focused the next day, so my career is going to suffer. If I drink too much, I might be a little bit more angry and intolerable and insufferable and be a worse father, husband, spouse, whatever the thing is going to be. And it ends up trying to get me high, but ends up with me being even further low. And now in this normal cycle, there's more on the negative side than the positive, and that's no good. Or if something like this has been happening and I'm just saying, you know what, I'm just going to numb myself out. I don't want to feel like this 24/7. And again, that's where a lot of the addictive substances come in because they numb the pain. And they start to make us forget that we're in pain for a long enough amount of time or an intense enough amount of time that we start to kind of depend on them to try and get to a state where we're not so much in the pain anymore. Both of those are big traps. It's why people start to get into that stuff. And before I start sounding like somebody that says, vices are bad, don't do that. No, no. There's a lot of times in this, like let's say, for example, it's a long period of bad stuff that's going on that, hey, a drink or two is actually going to help me get some space in my life to say, what do I do? What can I do to help mitigate this decision-making process or get away from a bad relationship or something like that? We do need a little bit of this kind of, not escapism, but perspective shift. And getting out of the state that you're in that's in pain can help us interrupt the pattern enough to actually be able to move on. The challenge is it's when it's trying to run away from something like this or like this that it really becomes something that ends up becoming a crutch that we rely on to try and get us out of that deep, dark, depressive, or anxious state. So here's what I personally did when I had something like this and this going on kind of at the same time. I won't get into that story too much. I made a whole video about how I don't share that story anymore, but if it's helpful to hear just a little bit about how it helped heal me to think through the things this way, I hope it helps. So number one, we want to stop running from the thing. And the challenge is, especially if it happened really early on in life, it's hard to even know that it happened. So talking to friends, talking to family, going into therapy, journaling, meditating, doing a lot of stuff to try and figure out, hey, where are these peakful states? And if I stop running from it and I turn to face it, yeah, it's going to be painful, but it's way less painful to stop running, turn and face it, and start to process it as an adult than to keep numbing and masking the pain, because it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and interrupting and ruining your life as you move forward. Number two, this is a really, really hard thing to do on your own. I already mentioned therapy, but coaches like me can help with this stuff to identify these types of things. There's a lot of medicine therapies out there. There's a lot of neurofeedback things that can happen. But really, if you have been stuck in this kind of cycle or this kind of cycle for a long time, it's really hard to get over the habitual stuff that's kind of kicked into your life. And talking to somebody else about this can help give some perspective to help you move on. And number three, let's play pretend. If something like this happens and you remembered it, and it's causing all of this negativity in life or reaching for other things to kind of help numb or mask a lot of this stuff out, well, let's pretend. What if this didn't happen? Just hypothetically, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and if that didn't happen and you stopped completely telling the story and you rewrote a new one, make it up, what would you do differently? How would you live your life? How would you talk to other people? How would you present yourself? And here's the thing. Remember how I said, if this is more than half of your life, it's really hard to start telling a different story. It's easier to get out of something like this for my older clients, for example, because now they have more positive memories and proof that this didn't happen for the majority of their life. So if you just get rid of the story, how would you move forward with your life? That, honestly, for me, was the biggest way to change a lot of the stuff. If X didn't happen, what would I be like as an adult if I actually felt like an adult? And it turned into all of the boring stuff, all of the things that are not glamorous and sexy and Instagram worthy. It's, I get to bed on time. Because when I get to bed on time, I'm a better spouse, I'm a better parent, I'm a better therapist. I show up better, I feel better, I don't have any hangovers, my body doesn't have any aches and pains. There's a lot of boring adult stuff that we say we want, but things like this tend to hold us back. It's the other boring stuff. Drinking enough water, eating good, clean food, hanging out with other people, giving more than I receive, all of this stuff that's been time-honored traditions of anybody in the self-help space telling us to do those things. So playing pretend and saying, hey, that's just my list. What is your list for what an adult is supposed to be like? And you make it up for yourself. I help people with this all the time, trying to figure out what is it that's happy-making for you and nobody else. And over time, what happens as we keep doing this is we just decrease this over and over, because this is not just an event that happened to you. It's something that informed how your nervous system and your belief processes actually see the world. And any little tiny wrong thing that happens turns into the worst thing in the world. So let's go back up here. If something bad happens, and you have your list of, hey, when bad things happen, because they're always going to, I react in this way. I reach out to this person for help. I sit and I meditate on this corner bench at this park because it reminds me of whatever. Whatever the thing is, prepare for life to kind of kick you in the butt a little bit, because it's just gonna. And the problems that used to be, oh, they took my binky away, or now all of a sudden my roof is leaking and I need a contractor for the electric box and I need all this different type of stuff, and now my dad's in the hospital, and all the things that just life tends to give us. So last thing I'm going to say before I wrap this video up, if you're interested in this stuff, especially if this concept of big giant spikes or long and low suffering appeal to you, I've got a whole course on this stuff. It's called Healing Emotions at fourlightswellness.com. I get into this. I get into specific exercises for the body that can help move some of this kind of traumatic tension holding energy out of the body to make these spikes a whole lot smaller. But that's it for this video. I hope this information is very helpful to you guys. As always, have a happy and healthy rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one.